And now we are joined by our analyst, Robert Rosenthal from IlliniBoard.com for another edition of the Sunday No Huddle. Robert, thank you for joining us. And is it safe to say that this is the lowest point of Illinois season right now?
Has to be. Yes, has to be. I mean, Virginia felt like a low point. Virginia felt like, the defense was starting to crumble. They did rebound 3 nice defensive games after that against Maryland and Purdue and Charlotte. But, yeah, when you have less than 100 yards and when you just get completely blown out, and the storylines, the former school, Paul Christ, somebody he worked with for years, with all the storylines, when that game ends like it did with 97 yards or 93 yards or whatever, that says it needs to be the low point of the season.
And we knew Illinois was going to be challenged by Wisconsin's run defense, although I was very surprised with how little they actually did run the ball.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those games, a friend and I were talking about it, like it was one of those games where it felt like they had a playbook. Like, you're running left and they are blitzing linebackers left. And, it's like, are they reading the play calls? It was just one of those games that felt like anything they tried, it just wasn't working. It snowballed from there. So, yeah, this is, if it's the least yards you've gained in 44 years, that says a lot. I mean, people remember the Moeller years. People remember, some dark times. So if you're hearkening back to that's a really, really tough look.
I mean, can you put yourself in Tony Peterson's shoes right now, or Rhett Bielema's shoes? Because the run game has been so strong this season. The pass game has struggled. And against Wisconsin, it seemed like they abandoned the run game and just went full force passing and didn't succeed. I mean,
yeah.
It was strange to me how that kind of happened.
Yeah, I think part of it was that Wisconsin was almost daring them. They were just leaving their corners on an island. They were saying, try to pass. We're going to stop the run. We know what you're going to do. We can take away your stuff. When we do that, it leaves us exposed, and you could probably throw on us, but we think we can handle you with less guys, and they did. And so when that happens, and when you don't have a passing game, other offensive coordinators and, other rosters, other passing offenses would look at what Wisconsin was doing on defense and saying, wow, we can really move the ball through the air here. I think any offensive coordinator would see that and think that. It's just Illinois couldn't do it. So when they've sold out to stop the run and leaving open passing lanes and you can't pass the ball, game's over. It's over quickly because, there's no more levers to pull.
Yeah, in time of possession, I want to talk about that a little bit too, because it was incredibly skewed. Wisconsin dominated for most of the game. Illinois' defense was on the field for, close to 45 minutes. I mean, what does that do to a defense and burning them out in that sense? Because I think, maybe Illinois' defense would have given them a chance if the offense had just maybe carried their weight.
Yeah, even, 5 minutes into the game, I tweeted like, okay, this already feels like every Wisconsin-Illinois game of the last 12 years of, Wisconsin will throw on third down if we have to. We think we can get about 5-6 yards on every carry. We'll just keep doing it. They had the 18-play drive to open up the game. They're immediately starting to wear down the defense. They know there's some injuries on the defense. You could see Calvin Avery over there in a walking boot on the sideline. They're getting really thin on the defensive line. And it's like, Wisconsin already has their plan in place 5 minutes into the game of like, look, you're going to wear down and, at a certain point you're not going to have much left and you don't have the depth to rotate and we're just going to dominate you the way we've usually dominated you, and that's the way it played out. So it was their blueprint. It's what they do. It's the way they want to win a college football game.
Yeah, and I think Kirby Joseph has really been shining these last couple games. I know we've talked about him before, but
yeah.
He is doing so much to give Illinois chances, and it's tough when the offense just really can't execute.
100%. Yeah. If there's an MVP on the team so far, it's easily Kirby Joseph. And again, as we've talked about, a player that the other staff said, I don't think we can use him as defensive back. We're going to move him to wide receiver. So you always, when you're a new coaching staff, you try to find those guys. Maybe he was at a different position. Maybe he just wasn't, maybe the former coaching staff should have taken a second look at him. Maybe the light bulb was starting to come on. So, the task now is to find more Kirby Josephs. You got to well over 85 scholarship players. Maybe in these last 5 games they start to discover who else they have on their roster and what players they can turn to in those kind of situations.
Yeah, and I think that's a positive thing that maybe we have seen with this coaching staff is taking players that either maybe didn't get a lot of action last year or played in a different position last season and kind of molding them into something new. Is that maybe just a silver lining that Illinois fans can look for here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you saw the players move to wide receiver. You saw Isaiah Williams at wide receiver. Now Deuce Spann at wide receiver. He was injured in this game. You've seen players move to tight end. You've seen, Vertus Brown move from offensive line to defensive line. So they are playing around with their roster. And with a season that now sits 2-5 with Penn State next, with the season, any chances of a bowl or anything slipping away, you might see more of that. You might see more on-the-field auditions. This is a staff with a very large roster trying to get to know that roster. There are 52 players on this roster who are at year 4 or later. Some of them are redshirt sophomores who had a redshirt year and the COVID year, so they're 4th year, but they're a sophomore. So I think you'll see some of that. What do we have in this guy? What do we have in this guy? Let's do a package, a few plays for this guy. What is this freshman bringing us? You might see a shift to more roster evaluation and thinking about next year. While still, obviously they're going to try to win games and they're trying to stay competitive, and they may be able to against Rutgers and Northwestern. But that might be what the move is after the bye week. You start to see more younger players, moved into certain spots.
Sure. I mean, do you think that's an injustice in a way to some of these super seniors on the team? They came back to this program to try and help Illinois win. They're clearly not doing that right now, but I put myself in their shoes sometimes, and I kind of think what that must be like for them. I mean, what do you think Rep Bielema is thinking right now and how he manages that situation with maybe trying to put younger players into some of those roles?
That is absolutely the debate. I mean, we saw it in 2016 with Lovie Smith halfway through that season. Instead of starting guys like, Chunky Clements was a starting defensive tackle. Rob Bain was a starting defensive tackle, both seniors at the beginning of that year. By the end of the year, they had moved to Jamal Woods and Kenyon Jackson as the starting 2 true freshmen were starting at defensive tackle. And so, they just basically kind of said to the seniors, look, we need to start preparing for the future. We're going to start these guys. Stanley Green took over in the secondary as a freshman in front of Taylor Barton. There were all these switches to say, hey, it's time to play the younger guys. That is a difficult thing for a head coach because, these super seniors, he talked them into coming back. He said, look, I want you to come back. I want to have this kind of year. So it's a difficult thing. But in the end, this is the coach. He has a roster. He needs to put the best players on the field. He has to look at everybody and say, here's who I think is performing the best right now, and make those decisions based on how he can move the program forward. And that's what he'll have to do the next, this back half of the season.
Yeah, and they're heading into the bye week, kind of the midway point of the season. Do you see the roster changes being pretty significant or maybe trickling in kind of as the season goes along?
Based on what we've seen, I think it's trickle in. I mean, Brett Bielema has even talked about that with guys like Deuce Spann of like the first week, let's do them this package. The next week, let's add a few more plays. Same thing with Seth Coleman. The first week, he had 1 pass rushing package. The next week, a few more. The next week, a little more. DJ Johnson has worked into the lineup as well, and it was the same thing. He had 1 set of plays, then a little more, then a little more. So the question is, you come out of Penn State, are there a couple freshmen, a couple sophomores that you see them getting these packages? Is there a wide receiver that gets 10 plays in the Penn State game and then gets 25 plays in the Rutgers game? That's what, that's mainly the thing to focus on here. It's, against Penn State, I don't know what the line's going to be. At Penn State, 25 points, something like that. It's going to be a rough go in Happy Valley. And so, turning forward, you got to think about the program. You got to think about next year. You got to think about evaluating this roster and figuring out what you're doing after the season.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that would be the best choice, though, to start maybe so many of those younger players against probably your best opponent of the season? It could
on the road.
Go ugly.
Yes,
yeah.
It could. Yes, that's the balance. When answering questions in press conferences, Brett Bielema talks about that all the time. Of that balance of, he even said, had I played Josh McCray against Nebraska, I think the moment would have overwhelmed him. And I think his quote was, it would have set him back 6 or 7 games. So he's very conscious of that. He doesn't want to overwhelm a freshman, a young guy. He wants to work him in slowly. So, he sees that process and he views his roster that way. The question is, are there some of these younger guys that have been getting plays here and there? And, Pat Bryant has been playing more at wide receiver, and Kenena Odeluga has been playing some on special teams. Does he get some linebacker snaps? Do they start to, progress those players forward? That's what we're going to see.
I know Illinois is not expected to win at Penn State, but what would you say might be a reasonable expectation for this team that could maybe point that they're heading in the right direction, even if it's not a win?
It needs to be a bounce back week for the offense. I mean, it has to be. There's been enough consistency for the defense and enough from a lot of the juniors and sophomores that you can kind of see what the defense will be in the future. On offense, there are 1,000 questions. So these 2 weeks, it's probably good to get away, however many days they give them off for the bye week. It's probably good to just unplug for a while, then reconnect and say, okay, what we were trying is not working. If it didn't work against Wisconsin, it's not going to work against Penn State. What can we do to, move this offense forward?
And I think the bye week comes at a good time after they're coming off this kind of gut-wrenching, loss, to give them, like as you mentioned, that time to decompress a little bit. I think it's needed for them.
Definitely, and I think, you even heard Brett Bielema say in the press conference, we got to get our coaches on the road. We have a free Friday night where we can go see some players. It is time for us to, they're not only evaluating the roster they inherited and who they have moving forward, they're evaluating who, are the next phase. What are the types of players they want to bring in so that a game like this never happens again.
I feel like they might be on the road looking for their next starting quarterback for next season.
Could be, yeah. I mean, they really like this Leary kid out of New Jersey, and he's the his brother's doing great at NC State, and they think he can do the same here. But yes, I mean, it could even be evaluating some transfer portal quarterbacks. It could be getting Art Sitkowski ready to be that guy. They have a lot of questions about the future coming up.
All right. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us, as always, again, on the Sunday No Huddle. You can find more from Robert on IlliniBoard.com. Is the website working?
Yes, the website is finally working this week, so people can actually check it out. Yes.
Awesome. Robert, thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
You got it. Thanks.